right? So I will go fast because I'm very interested in hearing how a teenager climbs 7 mountains, which I think is an impressive feat. So a couple of things on the world stage today, and I hear feedback. You get that? No? All right, maybe it's my imagination. First, I always talk about China because I think, well, one, venture capitalists are always investing in China. We've been doing that for a while. But this is something that maybe Alex will have an opinion on at some point. You don't need to shout it out. But when I was in high school, we used to talk about the socialist 5-year plans. Remember these? Every 5 years you would do this big plan. And they were planned economies, and they were considered failures. And yet I read nothing but fanfare about Beijing's most recently announced 5-year plan. And I'm like, oh yeah, and it was approved by the Communist Party. I'm like, that's right, they're a communist government. It's easy to forget that. The reason I bring that up is because so much of the growth right now of the US and the rest of the world is being based on China. China, the productivity, the growth in consumption that occurred last year, around 25% of the increment came from China, which is an amazing statistic when you think about the fact that that economy was about 1/5 the size 15 years ago. What I like about it, though, is I would love if our country was able to do this. They have targeted economic growth, meaning they're going to hit it. Last 5 years, they were growing at 11% a year. For any of you who do economics, you'll know that 11% is a staggering amount for an economy over $1 trillion.
Historical average in good times is 2%.
Yeah, 2% is the historical average. So they're targeting 7% for the next 5 years, setting inflation, by the way, at 5%, which I thought was interesting, and personal income growth rates, which is also pretty interesting because that's such a big deal around the world. It's one of the reasons the Middle East is having serious problems. Personal income growth at 7%. So if you are a US company, whether it's an internet company or a traditional S&P 500 company, you have to be thinking about how to tap into that China consumer growth. Another stat that I think a lot of you have probably seen over the years, but China has always had a desire for cars. This year, 18 million cars, 2010, 18 million cars were purchased in China. That is compared to 12.5 million in the US. And by the way, unlike Europe, the Chinese actually like big cars. They like cars that look more like American cars. And when you consider the energy problem that China has, I don't know how they're going to deal with that. Another stat I was looking at on the global stage, which is, Alex, I'm going to give you a trick question here. Or not a trick question, but something to guess at. Last year, the world economy delivered $73 trillion of GDP. 73 trillion. That's down from about 75 trillion before the crisis. In 2050, what is the projection? Alex, I'll give you one chance.
190 trillion.
Ah, you underguessed. He guessed 190 trillion. The consensus estimate by the UN is $350 trillion.
But that's discredited already.
Well, I don't know. At a growth rate of 4%. At a growth rate of 4%, which is not that much, by the way, when you consider how fast the world economy, the emerging markets are growing. I just bring it up because that means we need to create about another 50 Chinas, the equivalent of today, over the next 40 years. And that seems hard to believe, doesn't it?
Can you ask the room how many people think we'll actually do that?
Yeah, how many people think we'll actually do that? It's probably pretty low. There, we got one. On that note, yeah.
Can I just a question? Do you see any chance that we will change in that time as a species to a better way of measuring value than what GDP is right now?
Look, you know what I was thinking of, and I didn't see the stat when I saw that, but I thought that's 40 years from now. Well, 40 years ago it was 1970, and the world's changed, but it seems not that much. We can still all relate to the 1970s. For it to do that, though, what it says to me is all the things we've talked about over the years, the clean technology, telecommunications, clearly a lot more IT infrastructure, and then, of course, all the physical stuff that's going to need to be produced, garbage that's going to need to be dealt with. it's a figure that was hard for me to wrap my head around. But you know, even if you assume, Alex, 2% a year, it's still about 190 trillion.
Which
So,
is why I said that.
right. So you're thinking,
2%, 190 trillion.
right? I hear you, Mr. MIT. On the U.S. side,
it's just simple math.
a couple of things here that I thought were worth pointing out. Most of you probably saw that the unemployment rate, and you know, we've talked a lot about this. What is the unemployment rate? It's a fiction that somebody created, but as long as they consistently apply the fiction, we know that the rate 3 years ago is comparable to the rate this year. But it is a fiction. So the fictional number this month is 8.9% unemployment, which is really good. But that still means there's about 13.5 million people who've been laid off and not reemployed since the 2007 financial crisis. The 8.9%, one reason it's fiction is because the labor pool has dropped significantly since 2007. So the percent of the people employed, you know, looks better because the denominators shrunk. Where those people have gone, the Bureau of Labor Statistics just say they disappeared, whatever that means.
We'll show up again on election day, don't worry.
We'll show up on election day. That's probably true. Sometimes I point this out. This is the stuff I do to amuse myself. But as I mentioned, every month we predict the unemployment rate and then we revise it. So December, the unemployment rate was predicted to be a new job creation, 103,000. Now it's 152,000 jobs. So we created 50,000 jobs that we didn't know about. That's all good. Tom, you talked a little bit about, in thinking about jobs, how the acquisitions are really starting to ramp up at GDC, the Gamers Development Conference. We've seen that in our own portfolio. One of our companies, it's an angel seed stage company we backed. They, two big companies talked to them this week. And I heard at different times on Tuesday and on Thursday, I spoke with the CEO. And I said, oh, you talked to, you know, that big company, what did they want to know? And it was really interesting. Both of the CEOs said virtually the same thing. You know, they asked us about our organization chart. They asked us about our developers. They went down to how many years of experience the average developer has been there, where they come from, are the developers willing to move to the Bay Area? And they almost didn't really get to, hey, what does your company do? So these really have become talent acquisition opportunities. And if you are a company, a mobile company, and you are trying to hire Android developers right now, you're in a world of hurt. I mean, and iPhone, the same thing. Incredibly limited skill sets. And this is, in my mind, sort of a microcosm of the whole problem we have in our economy, which is talent becomes obsolete so fast, right? I mean, I think a lot of us, there's a lot of gray hair in the room. We remember when Fortran and COBOL were the languages you need to learn and know. And by the way, you could live half a career on those languages. And now you don't know PHP, you know, Ruby on Rails. I see it, in fact, every time I hear the media or someone in politics